Hello students and welcome back to Toppscholars. In today's session, we are going to discuss all the important questions from the topic life processes that can be asked in your upcoming exam. So let's start with it. So let's look at the chapter-wise weightage of this topic. Blue stands for 1-mark question, yellow stands for 2-marker questions and teal stands for 4-marker questions. Okay, so at least 2 questions of the MCQ kind is expected to be asked from this topic. 2 questions of 2 markers each, that is very small answer category of questions can be asked, and a 4-marker question can also be asked from this topic. Alright, so let's quickly discuss all the important questions. Let's look at the MCQ first. Shivani places a plant in a sunlight with its root in a colored solution. After some time, the colored lines are seen in the stem. This proves option A, food movement in phloem, option B, water movement in xylem, option C, gaseous exchange in leaves, option D, transpiration rate. So let's solve this question. Children, you can see this diagram, right? Over here you can see that this plant is kept in a beaker which is filled with this colorful solution. Yes, and after some time, what did they observe? That this color was seen in the stems of this plant. And the question was asked, how is that possible? Where is this colored water or this colored solution passing through and entering in the stems, making it orangish color? Now children, let's look at the options again. Is it because of the food movement in phloem? Is it because of the water movement in xylem? Is it because of gaseous exchange in leaves? And is it because of the transpiration rate? Now children, we all know that the roots can only and only absorb water and metals. Now that they were placed in this colorful solution, this means that the roots were absorbing this colorful solution. We know that the water passes from the root hair into the cortex and eventually into the xylem. That means this colorful solution is also traveling in this pathway, in this direction, and because of which the stems are appearing colorful in nature. Please get the statement. Therefore, because of which the stems appear colorful, and hence the correct answer will be option B, that is the water movement in the xylem. Now let's look why the other options are incorrect. Option A says the food movement in the phloem. Clearly there was no food transportation that we were seeing over here in this particular example. Therefore option A cannot be correct. Option C, gaseous exchange in the leaves is responsible for that colorful stem. Absolutely not. The gaseous exchange is simply O2-CO2 exchange. That does not lead to movement of water or this colorful solution. Alright. And even transpiration is an incorrect answer. I hope this was clear. Now let's move on to the next question. If the blood pressure of a person is 90 by 60 mmHg, which of the following condition is likely to happen? Option A, the blood pressure remains normal. Option B, hypertension. Option C, hypotension. And option D, arterial rupture. Now let's solve this question. Children, we can see over here a picture of the blood vessel and the blood flowing through it. Alright. First, let's understand the term blood pressure. Children, we know that the blood passes through the blood vessel. It flows through the blood vessel. Let me make this simple for you to imagine. We all must have played with hose pipe when we were children, right? And when you keep the hose pipe open, the water simply falls down. But when you close the opening of the hose pipe to like 50% of it, the water will be ejected out at a very high pressure. Yes or no? So blood pressure is similar to this. The blood which is flowing through the blood vessel, it applies pressure or it applies force on the walls of the blood vessel. So we can see over here, this is a blood vessel and this is the blood flowing through it. the blood will apply some pressure on the wall of the vessels, and this pressure is known as the blood pressure. Children, the blood pressure is generated because of the heart. Now let's understand. We know that the heart contracts and relaxes, right? When the heart contracts, it will pump the blood into the blood vessels, into the arteries. So the pressure through which it is contracting and pumping the blood in the blood vessel, that gives rise to the blood pressure. And specifically, it is known as the systolic blood pressure. So what is systolic blood pressure? The systolic blood pressure is the pressure at which the blood is being pumped into the blood vessel by the heart. It is of the higher number, that is 120 mmHg. Getting it, children? Similarly, when the heart relaxes after contraction, the blood still continues to flow with a slightly lower pressure, and this pressure is known as the diastolic blood pressure, and its value is of the lower limit 80 mmHg, and therefore our blood pressure is 120 by 80 mmHg in a normal and healthy individual. Okay, children? Now, in the question, the value is given that if blood pressure is 90 by 60 mmHg, then what will happen? We can clearly see that the normal blood pressure is 120 by 80 mmHg, and in the question the blood pressure is given 90 by 60 mmHg. That means there is a drop in the pressure, and this condition is known as hypotension. What is its condition known as? This condition is known as hypotension. Hypo means reduced. So over here, since the blood pressure is reduced, this condition is known as hypotension. Hypotension, children, is a dangerous condition because when the blood pressure falls down, the blood is flowing through a very slow speed in the body, and sensitive organs like our brain may suffer due to it. The neurons of the brain or the brain cells, they are not able to perform efficiently with slow availability of oxygen, glucose and other nutrients. And as a result of that, the brain will start shutting down, and we may start feeling dizzy, or in extreme scenarios, we may even faint. Alright, so hypertension, children, is a dangerous condition, and therefore we need to make sure that our blood pressure remains within the normal range, and that is only possible by observing our states of body and states of mind. If we feel dizzy or if we feel weak, suddenly we might get blackouts. These are all the signs of hypertension. Okay, so we need to observe our state. We need to also go for a regular health checkup. So in our question, here the correct answer is option C, that is hypotension. Okay, now let's see why the other options are incorrect. Obviously, the blood pressure is not normal. The normal blood pressure is 120 by 80 mmHg. Hypertension is a condition where the blood pressure is higher. It increases more than 120 by 80 mmHg. So when the pressure is more than 120 by 80 mmHg, then that condition is known as hypertension. Okay. Option D says arterial rupture. Arterial rupture is basically the arteries bursting. So let's look at this is a normal artery. It is completely healthy. It is covered. And artery bursting would look something like this, where the walls of the artery has ruptured and the blood is flowing out. Children, this is only possible when the blood pressure increases, when there is hypertension, which is not treated, which is not managed on time. Alright, in low blood pressure, the arteries will never rupture. Therefore, option D is also incorrect. Alright, chalo. Now let's move on to the next question. The breakdown of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in option A, cytoplasm, option B, Golgi complex, option C, mitochondria, and option D, nucleus. Children, this is a very straightforward question. Are you able to attempt it on your own? Yes. The answer is C, mitochondria. If you were not, don't worry. Let me explain this to you. Children, we know that glucose is a molecule with abundant energy, right? It is broken down in the cytoplasm into a 3-carbon compound which is pyruvate. And in available of oxygen, children, it is further broken down into carbon dioxide, water and release of energy or ATP. Children, this pathway is seen in the mitochondria, and therefore option C is correct. That is, the breakdown of glucose is completed in the mitochondria. This breakdown of glucose that takes place in mitochondria in presence of oxygen, this is known as aerobic respiration, which generates highest amount of energy. If I give you a data, that is 38 molecules of ATP. Whereas in cases of anaerobic respiration, that is when the breakdown of glucose takes place in absence of oxygen, which is when we are exercising. In this case, children, that is in case of anaerobic respiration, only 2 molecules of ATP are produced. So you can see there is a huge difference when the glucose is broken down in presence and in absence of oxygen. The highest ATP is released in the presence of oxygen, which is 38 molecules. I hope this is clear. So the correct answer is option C, that is the mitochondria. Now let's look at the next question. Take a look at the image which is given below. Which part of the heart acts as a partition between the 2 ventricles? So let's look into it. Over here, children, let's quickly label first the parts of the heart. Okay. This is our right atrium, children. We can see there's an arrow coming down into this chamber. This will be the right ventricle. Okay. Similarly, we can see over here, this is the left atrium and an arrow is coming down. This is the left ventricle. From here, we can see from a right ventricle, there is this artery coming out. This is the pulmonary artery, the only exception. In what sense? It is the only artery to carry deoxygenated blood. Similarly, children, we can see from the left ventricle, we can see this particular artery. This is our aorta. Okay. This blood vessels which is entering into the right ventricle, this is the superior vena cava, bringing the deoxygenated blood from parts superior to the heart. And this is the inferior vena cava, which brings the deoxygenated blood from the parts which are inferior to the heart. So the SVC and IVC, they are bringing the deoxygenated blood into the right atrium, which is flowing into the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. Similarly, pulmonary veins is bringing oxygenated blood into the left atrium, and from the left atrium it's entering into the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle it is entering into the aorta. Okay. The question asked over here is, which part of the heart separates the 2 ventricles? That means we are talking about this part. As we have labeled the right and the left ventricle, we are talking about this part, that which is this partition, which is this segment, which is this membrane. Let's look at the option. Option A points at label 1, which is this. These are the arteries of the aorta. So obviously it is nowhere close to ventricles, therefore this cannot be the right answer. Option B points at the label number 2. Label number 2 is this, which is exactly dividing the right ventricle from the left ventricle. This is known as the interventricular septum. What is it known as? Interventricular septum. Septum is a membrane. Inter means between the ventricles. So interventricular septum is a membrane that separates 2 ventricles from each other. Interventricular septum, children, is essentially made up of muscle. So it's a muscular layer of the heart. Now, why is this septum important? So that the deoxygenated blood which comes in the right ventricle don't mix with the oxygenated blood that comes in the left ventricle. Because mixing of blood means little oxygen will be delivered to the cell as compared to pure oxygenated blood delivered to the cell. Okay. Therefore, option B is correct. However, let's quickly look at option C and D. Option C talks about this vein, which is the superior vena cava. Obviously, it is nowhere close to the ventricle. It opens in the right atrium. And option D is number 4. These are the pulmonary veins, which brings oxygenated blood into the left atrium. Again, it is nowhere close to ventricles. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Okay, now let's look at the next MCQ. Which part of the nephron reabsorbs water and salts? Option A, Bowman's capsule. Option B, loop of Henle. Option C, collecting duct. And option D is glomerulus. Let's look at the solution, children. So here we can see the entire structure of the nephron, right? Here we can see this cup-shaped Bowman's capsule, and inside this Bowman's capsule we can see afferent arteriole which is entering and breaking into this glomerulus, right? This convoluted part is the PCT, children. This loop-like structure, this is the loop of Henle, and the second convoluted part is the TCT. Now we know that water and salts are reabsorbed in the loop of Henle, where in the descending limb of Henle there is reabsorption of water, and from the ascending limb of Henle there is reabsorption of the salts. Okay, therefore the correct answer is option B, that is loop of Henle. Now let's see why the other options are incorrect. Children, Bowman's capsule is a site where the filtrate enters, right? Remember that the glomerulus is this blood vessel present in the Bowman's capsule. Now from the glomerulus, because of pressure, lots of things will enter. This includes the water, ions, nitrogenous waste, etc. Okay, so Bowman's capsule is not a site of reabsorption. It is the site where the filtrate enters from the glomerulus. Therefore, option A is incorrect. Talking about the collecting duct, children, that is option C. It is also incorrect because it only helps in conditional reabsorption of water and salts. Alright. And glomerulus, children, as we talked about, it's a capillary where there is no reabsorption. Rather, at the glomerulus, we see filtration. Okay. Therefore, option D is also incorrect. Okay, students, now let's look at this MCQ. During which life process is energy released in a usable form? Option A, respiration. Option B, digestion. Option C, photosynthesis. And option D is transpiration. Let's look at the solution now. Children, we know that cellular respiration is a process in which the glucose is broken down by oxygen, which results in formation of carbon dioxide and water, and along with it a huge amount of energy is released in the form of ATP. Therefore, the correct answer is option A, that is respiration. Now let's see why the other options are incorrect. So children, digestion is simply breaking down of a large substance into a small substance. That is, the carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, or proteins are broken down into amino acids. In this process, children, energy is not released. Therefore, option B is incorrect. Similarly, children, photosynthesis is a process in which the energy is captured from the sunlight and it is converted into a chemical energy. That means there is no release of energy, right? The sun's energy is trapped and kept in the form of starch or the glucose. So, as there is no release of energy, the photosynthesis is also incorrect. Now, talking about transpiration, children, transpiration is loss of water from the plant in the form of water vapor. Therefore, it is also irrelevant to the question as there is no release of energy. Therefore, option A is the correct answer. Let's move ahead. Companion cell assists which of the following in translocation? Option A, sieve tubes. Option B, tracheids. Option C, xylem vessels. And option D, root hairs. So let's look at the solution. Children, we can see over here We can see these are the companion cells. These guys on the outside. Okay, children. Companion cells are found next or they accompany the sieve tube cells. Okay, and this sieve tube cells, children, they help in the movement of food or translocation of the food. Getting it? Therefore, the companion cells, children, they help the sieve tube cells. They help in conduction of sucrose from leaves to other parts of plant. Okay, therefore option A is the correct answer. Alright children, please pay attention. Companion cells are not found near trichids, xylem vessels and root hairs, and therefore they are incorrect answers. Now let's look at the next question. Assertion: anaerobic respiration produces less energy than aerobic respiration. Reason for it is that in anaerobic respiration, glucose is completely oxidized to carbon dioxide and water. Now, you have to select the correct option. Option A says, both assertion and reason are true and reason correctly explains the assertion. Option B says, both assertion and reason are true, but reason does not explain the assertion correctly. Option C, assertion is true, but reason is false. And option D, assertion is false, but reason is true. So let's look at the above statements one more time before finding the right option. Assertion says that anaerobic respiration produces less energy than aerobic respiration. So let's quickly look why is it correct. Anaerobic respiration, children, means that the glucose is broken down in absence of oxygen. In this case, children, only 2 molecules of ATP are produced. Whereas in aerobic respiration, the glucose is broken down in presence of oxygen that produces carbon dioxide, water and 38 molecules of ATP. So obviously children, anaerobic respiration, it produces less energy, only 2 molecules of ATP, as compared to aerobic respiration that produces 38 molecules of ATP. Okay, so assertion is correct. Now the reason that they have explained why is this the case is that in anaerobic respiration, glucose is completely oxidized to CO2 and water. Now children, this is incorrect. In aerobic respiration, children, the glucose is broken down into lactic acid. That is, for example, a muscle cell struggling to contract even with no availability of oxygen, or it can be broken down into alcohol in certain microbes. That means when glucose is broken down without oxygen, we do not get CO2 and water. We might get lactic acid or we might get alcohol. That also helps us understand that glucose is not completely broken down. And therefore, the reason is incorrect statement itself. Forget the incorrect explanation, it's an incorrect statement. And therefore, the correct answer will be option C, where the assertion is true, but the reason is false. Right, students? Okay. So, we can also see over here, this is the anaerobic respiration where they have shown where the glucose is broken down into pyruvate and further into lactic acid, and only 2 ATP molecules are released. So, very little energy is released, which is correct, and we can see that the glucose is broken down only into lactic acid. It is not completely broken down into CO2 and H2O. Therefore, the C will be the correct answer. I hope this is clear. Yes. Now, let's move ahead. Assertion: during exhalation, the diaphragm moves upwards. Reason: upward movement of the diaphragm will increase the volume of the thoracic cavity. Options are: both assertion and reason are true and reason correctly explains the assertion. Option B, both assertion and reason are true, but reason does not explain the assertion. Option C, assertion is true, but reason is false. Option D, assertion is false, but reason is true. So let's solve it. Children, during expiration, the thoracic volume, as you can see over here, the thoracic volume reduces, and the reason for that is the diaphragm relaxes and moves upwards. So compare inspiration with expiration. Look at the diaphragm. Children, over here in inspiration, the diaphragm has gone down and it has become flat. But during expiration, the same diaphragm became U-shaped or dome-shaped as it moved upwards. Now, this will lead to reduction in the thoracic cavity. So, you can see over here, the thoracic cavity is so big in size, right? The volume of the thoracic cavity has increased in inspiration. But during expiration, the volume of the thoracic cavity reduces as the diaphragm relaxes and moves upwards. So, let's look at the options. Children, assertion is during exhalation, the diaphragm moves upwards. This is correct. But the reason for that is that the upward movement of the diaphragm increases the volume of thoracic cavity. This is incorrect. It reduces the volume of thoracic cavity. Look into this diagram again. You can see how the volume of the thoracic cavity is reduced. Therefore, the correct answer is option C, where the assertion is true but reason is false. Alright children, now let's move to 2 marker questions, that is a very short answer category. First question is, differentiate between the autotrophic and the heterotrophic nutrition with examples. Children, what is nutrition first? Nutrition is the process of providing or obtaining the food to an organism which is necessary for their health and overall growth. And nutrition is of 2 types. There is a autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. Now let's understand each of it in detail. Children, autotrophic nutrition is a type of nutrition when an organism prepares its own food. See, when you look at the word auto, children, what does auto means? Auto means self, meaning such organisms are reliant on themselves. Such organisms can produce their own food, and they are nothing but our green plants and green bacteria. Organisms who have chlorophyll like pigment or chlorophyll itself, they have the ability to trap the energy from the sun and convert that energy into food. That is, they perform photosynthesis. Everybody is able to recollect the reaction. What is the reaction of photosynthesis? CO2 plus H2O in presence of sunlight will give us glucose or starch and will liberate oxygen. Yes, so autotrophic nutrition means organisms who are able to produce their own food. Now, along with autotrophic nutrition, we also get to see heterotrophic nutrition on earth. This is a type of nutrition which is seen in organisms who cannot make their own food, meaning they are not chlorophyll containing organisms and therefore they cannot trap the energy from the sunlight. That means they cannot make their own food. In this case, children, such organisms will depend on those organisms who can make their own food. Alright, so heterotrophic mode of nutrition is a mode of nutrition in which the organisms depend upon the other organisms for food to survive. So they may depend upon plants directly or they may depend upon another animals for food. Okay, heterotrophic mode of nutrition is of 3 types. We have the saprophytic mode of nutrition, parasitic mode of nutrition and holozoic mode of nutrition. Let's understand each of them. Saprophytic mode of nutrition is a type of nutrition in which an organism obtains its own food from dead and decaying bodies. Children, usually the fungi and certain bacteria, whenever they see a dead organisms like a dead rat or a dead cat or a dead bird, children, this fungi and this bacteria, they release enzymes outside the body and they start digesting their dead bodies. That means they start breaking down their carbohydrates into glucose, proteins into amino acids, fats into fatty acids and glycerol, and then they absorb all these glucose, amino acids and fatty acids. So organisms who depend on dead living organisms to obtain their food from, this mode of nutrition is known as saprophytic mode of nutrition, and these organisms are known as saprophytes. So who are saprophytes? It is various fungi and various bacteria. We can see over here mushrooms, they are a type of fungus. Coming to the parasitic mode of nutrition. Children, it's a mode of nutrition where an organism just does not want to work hard at all. It simply wants to steal the food from the other organism's digestive system. Let's read it. So, types of nutrition in which an organism lives on or inside the bodies of a host. Like for example, take tapeworm. Children, tapeworm are found in the small intestines of a body. Small intestine is a place where we completely finish the digestion. That means in the small intestine, we will have amino acids, glucose, sucrose, and we'll have vitamins and minerals and so on. So these tapeworms, who are very smart, they are attached to the small intestine, and as soon as your digestion is completed and these nutrients are released, they will absorb it inside the body. These are parasites, and this mode of nutrition is parasitic. Okay. So other than tapeworm, children, even mosquitoes who feed on our blood, leech, they are all parasites. Some are present inside the body, for example, tapeworm. So tapeworm is an endoparasite. Whereas leech, or let's say flies, ticks, which we find on dogs and cats, these are present on body, outer body of the host. Therefore, they are known as the ectoparasites. Okay. Now, let's look at the last mode of nutrition. That is a holozoic mode of nutrition. It is a mode of nutrition where the organisms intake either the solid food or the liquid food inside their body, and which includes us, humans and elephants. So, humans and elephants, they show holozoic mode of nutrition. Alright, children? Clear? Now, let's move ahead. Now, let's look at the 2-marker questions. The first is, describe the process of nutrition in amoeba. Alright, so let's look at the solution. Children, we can see over here amoeba, right? The amoebas are shapeless protists. More specifically, they are shapeless unicellular protists. So we can see this is a simple cell and this is their nucleus. Okay. Now, whenever amoeba senses some food, which could be glucose or it could be bacteria, it will move towards that food. So over here we can see this is a small bacteria which is acting as a source of food for amoeba, and the amoeba is moving in this direction. Now, how does it exactly move? It will extend its finger-like structures. So it will extend its cytoplasm, forming pseudopodia, which is false feet. Some books even refer pseudopodia as foot-like structures. Okay, so the pseudopodias will move towards the source of food. Once it moves in that direction, children, this pseudopodia will try to embrace it. It will try to hug it. So we can see over here how this pseudopodia is trying to hug the bacteria, and the reason for that is it will try to take it inside its body by hugging it. Okay, so we can see over here, this is the next image, this is the 4th in line. So that is how the bacteria entered inside the body of the amoeba. Once it enters inside the cell of amoeba, it turns into a sac, or it actually merges with a sac which is known as a vacuole, and together it will be known as the phagosome. Okay. Now this phagosome, it will further merge with a lysosome. We all know lysosome is a bag of enzymes which are digestive in nature. So once the phagosome merges with the lysosome, we get phagolysosomes, in where the food is present along with numerous digestive enzymes, which will break the food into simple substances. Now, once the food is broken down into simple substances, all these simple substances will be absorbed inside the amoeba. Okay. The waste, however, is still present in that sac. Now, we can see this waste being propelled to the end of the cell, which could be at literally any point because this is completely irregular. So, it will be taken to the end of a cell at one point and all this waste will be expelled out. Alright, and this entire process of digestion in amoeba is known as phagocytosis. Are we clear, children? Okay, now let's move ahead. What is hemodialysis and when is it used? Let's solve it. Children, hemodialysis is a process in where we purify the blood. And this process is done outside the body. So, purifying the blood outside the body is hemodialysis. Now, children, why is this a case? Why we want to purify the blood outside the body? Children, in our body, naturally, the kidneys, they play a very important role in purification of blood. In what sense but? Let's understand. Our blood contains a lot of water-soluble nitrogenous waste like ammonia, urea and uric acid. And this waste are highly toxic, meaning as it is produced, it needs to be quickly removed from the body. So you might think that, ma'am, okay, if this waste needs to be removed, we can add it in the feces and throw out by the digestive system. Yes or no? But unfortunately, we cannot do so because these are water soluble. Feces is not liquid, right? That means we need a watery waste thrown out of the body, in which we can add all these toxic nitrogenous substances. And for that, the nature has built kidneys. So nature gave us two kidneys which produces urine, which is a waste. It's liquid in nature, and in that we add all this nitrogenous waste and throw it out of the body. And in this sense, we are purifying the blood. Okay, so kidneys purify the blood by throwing out the nitrogenous waste of the body, which naturally happens for years till we die. But for some reasons, if our kidneys are damaged or if they are failing, that is, in cases of kidney failures or in severe cases of diabetes, our kidneys are unable to produce urine. That means the kidneys is not able to throw out the nitrogenous waste from the body. In this case, children, what will happen? The levels of this waste will increase in the body and it can be very toxic and damaging to the other organs. So, patients with kidney failures or with severe diabetes, in such patients, hemodialysis is done. It's a process through which the blood is taken out of the body, as you can see over here, and it is added in this hemodialysing machine. In this hemodialysing machine, children, you can see the blood will move in this downward direction, and in just the opposite direction, moving upward, will be a fluid present in this machine which is known as dialysate fluid. So the blood is moving downwards and this dialysate fluid is moving upwards in opposite direction. So let's draw that quickly once so that you understand. Now the blood is moving downwards through here, okay, and the dialysate fluid is moving upwards through here. Due to this opposite flow of the fluid, children, the nitrogenous waste will move from the blood into this dialysate fluid. Okay, so what all is moving? We have the nitrogenous waste, which includes ammonia, urea, and uric acid. Along with that, even excess water and excess salts or ions, that is sodium ion or potassium ions or chloride ions or H plus ions, even bicarbonate ions. All the excess water, excess ions, salts and nitrogenous waste are removed from the blood. That is, the blood is being purified from all this nitrogenous waste and excess substances outside the body in this hemodialysis machine. Now, once the blood is purified, the purified blood is again sent back into the body. And this is how hemodialysis works. Children, this entire process of purifying entire 5 liters of blood, I hope you all know we have total 5 liters of blood in our body. So, this entire process of purifying 5 liters of blood takes roughly 3 to 5 hours. And a person needs to visit hospital or need to undergo this process at least 2 to 3 times a week, so that the blood stays purified. I hope, children, this is clear. What is hemodialysis? It's a process to purify the blood outside the body. In what kind of patients do we see? We see in those patients where the kidney is not functioning adequately, where we have kidney failures, or in cases of severe diabetes. Through this process, we are removing the nitrogenous waste, excess water and excess salts, and thus purifying the blood. I hope this was clear. Alright, now let's move to the next question. What is blood pressure and differentiate between systolic and diastolic pressure? So let's solve it. Children, blood pressure is the pressure or the force that blood exerts on the walls of blood vessel it is flowing through. So children, imagine a hose pipe. We all must have played with hose pipe in our childhood, right? And the hose pipe is connected to tap. You open the tap and the water is going to flow through that blood vessel. Yes or no? Similarly, our blood is also flowing through blood vessels like this, right? And the pressure through which it is flowing is referred as the blood pressure. Now, let's look at the types of blood pressure. We have systolic blood pressure and we have diastolic blood pressure. Now, let's look at the difference between the two. Children, the blood is flowing through the blood vessels because the heart is contracting and pumping it outwards. We all know that the heart contracts and pumps the blood outside into the blood vessel. So, the pressure which is generated when the heart contracts and pumps the blood out is known as the systolic pressure. Okay, so the pressure that is generated by the contraction of the heart is known as the systolic blood pressure, and it is of the higher value, that is 120 mmHg. Similarly, children, after contraction, when the heart rests, the blood still continues to flow in the vessel through some pressure and force, and that pressure is known as the diastolic blood pressure. It is of a lower value, and that is 80 mmHg. So, systolic blood pressure refers to the pressure which is applied by the heart during the contraction of the heart, and diastolic blood pressure is the pressure which we see when the heart is in a relaxed state. Therefore, our blood pressure is 120 by 80 mmHg, where the higher number stands for systolic blood pressure and the lower number stands for diastolic blood pressure. So let's quickly look at this table. Systolic pressure, it is the maximum pressure which is exerted on the walls of the arteries when the heart contracts to pump the blood out inside the body, and that is 120 mmHg. mmHg stands for millimeter of mercury. Alright, and diastolic pressure, it is the pressure in the arteries when the heart is in a relaxed state between the two heartbeats, and that is 80 mmHg. Alright students, now let's move to the next question. How do plants excrete waste products, and give examples? Children, plants do not have kidneys like we do, right? We use kidneys to excrete out all the nitrogenous waste in the form of urine, but plants don't have that. Does that mean the plants don't do excretion? No. Plants still need to perform excretion because it also have this toxic waste product, and even without kidneys, they do it quite efficiently. So let's look at the different ways they do the excretion. The first and foremost, they excrete all the gaseous waste through the openings present in the leaves, which are the stomata, and lenticels, which is the opening present in the woody stem of the plant. So through the stomata and lenticels, they will excrete out CO2 and O2. O2 is a waste product, children. I hope you all know O2 is a waste product for plant produced during photosynthesis. Yes, and CO2 is waste product which is produced during respiration. So these gases are exchanged out, or it is excreted out through stomata and lenticels. Now, the second way through which the plant excretes the other waste product is by sending all that waste products into the dead cells or tissues of the plants. Some of these waste products, they are removed from the plant in the form of fallen leaves and fruits. So when the leaves and fruits, they fall from the plant, they also carry away some of this excretory waste products. For example, children, in rubber plants, the waste products is excreted in the form of latex. Okay, so these are the 4 different ways that even without the kidneys and the excretory system, plant will excrete all their waste outside their bodies. Alright, now let's move to the next question. Now this is a 4-marker question, children. Ananya often ate sweets and rarely brushed her teeth at night. And after a few weeks, she noticed pain in one of her teeth. The dentist found that it was leading to dental caries. Answer the following questions. First, what causes dental caries? Second, what is a dental plaque? And third, how can Ananya prevent tooth decay? Now let's look at the solution. Children, first let's understand what is a dental plaque. Children, on our teeth, there is this invisible film, or there is an invisible layer of microbes, saliva, and some amount of glucose as well. Okay, and this invisible layer is known as the dental plaque. Alright, children. Now, children, what happens is that when we eat food and we do not gargle after eating that, or we do not brush properly twice a day, or we do not floss, we don't do any of those dental hygiene practices that one must do. In this case, children, whatever food we eat, it gets stuck to the tooth. Now, the bacteria which are present in this plaque, they will release enzymes that will digest this food. And when they start digesting this food, it produces acid. Yes, literally, your tooth is covered by acid produced by these bacteria. So, your tooth has all these acids on it. Now, children, you know acid is very harmful, right? Acid will start burning your teeth. And that's exactly what happens over here. Acid starts corroding the outer layer of the teeth, that is the enamel. The white layer, children, that we see, this white layer, this is made up of enamel, and this acid dissolves the enamel. Enamel is a protective layer of the teeth, because just below this thick layer of enamel, children, we have several nerves, we have the root canal, and we have lots of other blood vessels and important significant structures of the teeth. So when this enamel starts becoming thin on dissolution, as it comes in contact with the acid, you are exposing your teeth to further injury. You are exposing your teeth to root canal and pain. And as a result, children, when there is constant dental plaque which is building on your teeth, the bacteria are digesting, they are dissolving the enamel. And therefore, when you eat anything sweet on that tooth, it will lead to an instant pain in your teeth. This dental plaque, children, if it is not cleared and if it is not managed or taken care in early stages, it will lead to dental caries. That is, in simple words, it will lead to tooth decay. And still, if it not taken care of, you might have to undergo a root canal procedure to save your tooth. Therefore, it is very important to maintain the dental hygiene practices. Now, let's quickly enlist what we can do. One, we can always gargle thoroughly after meals. Second, we need to brush twice in a day. Third and very important is using of floss. Children, floss is done by using this very small and thin thread to clean between the teeth. Usually the toothbrush, it does not reaches this very tiny areas between the teeth, and as a result of which the dental plaques and caries are easily developed between the teeth. So how do you take care of it? Floss every night between the teeth, and this flossing will prevent development of the plaque and eventually tooth decay. Also, we can make use of fluoride toothpaste. It is very important to maintain the thickness of the enamel. So these are the 4 practices that we can do to prevent these conditions. I hope, children, we are clear with it. Okay, let's look at this diagram one more time, children. We can see over here, this is a healthy tooth. Over here, the plaque can be start building on the top of the teeth or even on the side of the teeth that we can see in this image. And when the plaque is not taken care of and this dental hygiene practices are not maintained, because of the production of acid, your enamel will start becoming thin and it will lead to this tooth decay and tooth cavity. Alright, chalo children, now let's move ahead. Alright student, now let's look at this long answer question. Describe the mechanism of breathing and gaseous exchange in human beings. Alright, so when we talk about breathing, we need to mention inspiration and expiration process. So we know that inspiration is taking a breath in and expiration is taking a breath out. But let's understand how exactly does this happen. First thing, children, to take a breath in, we want the air to enter from the atmosphere into our lungs, right? And air always move from higher pressure to lower pressure. Now, we cannot increase the atmospheric pressure, but we can reduce the lung pressure. And by default, the atmospheric pressure becomes high and the air will enter from the atmosphere into the lungs. So how does inspiration takes place? By reducing the lung pressure. Now, how will we reduce the lung pressure? So we need to remember the formula that pressure is inversely proportional to volume. So if we want to reduce the lung pressure, we need to increase the lung volume. That means we need the lungs to expand. Alright. So we will increase the lung volume. Now how we will increase the lung volume? How will we expand the lungs? So let's understand. We are going to contract two main muscles. The first muscle is diaphragm and the second muscle is the external intercostal muscle. So, when we contract the diaphragm, the dome-shaped diaphragm becomes flat, and as a result of which the lungs can expand in vertical diameter. Hence, the size increases. Similarly, the external intercostal muscle is a muscle which is present between the ribs, and when it contracts, it moves the ribs upwards and outwards, and as a result of which the lungs can expand in the AP direction and the lungs can also expand in the horizontal direction, right? So now since lungs is expanding in all the three directions, that is the vertical direction because of the contraction of diaphragm, AP direction because of the contraction of external intercostal, and horizontal direction because of the contraction of the same muscle, the size of the lung increases. Now as the size of the lung increases, the lung volume also increases, and when the lung volume increases, the lung pressure decreases, and as a result of which the air will move from atmosphere into the lungs, right? Expiration is a complete opposite process of inspiration. Now, in expiration, we want the air to move from the lungs into the atmosphere, and for that, what needs to be done? The lung pressure has to be increased, right? Then only it will be expiring out, it will be moving out. So we need to increase the lung pressure. Now how do we increase that? We know that pressure is inversely proportional to volume, right? So we need to decrease the lung volume. Now remember, in inspiration we had increased the size of the lungs in this direction, vertical direction and the horizontal direction. Now we will reduce the size of the lung in the same direction by relaxing these muscles, right? So how will we reduce the lung volume? We will relax the diaphragm and we will relax the external intercostal muscle, and thus the lungs which were expanded during inspiration, it will return back to its original size. So as the lung volume decreases, the lung pressure will increase and the air will be expelled out. I hope this was clear, children. Now let's understand the gaseous exchange. Now children, the gaseous exchange, it happens at two sites. One, it happens at the alveolar site, and second, it happens at the cellular or the tissue site. Now let's understand this. So children, the air that we have inspired, it enters inside the alveoli, right? Now this air is going to carry a lot of fresh oxygen and some amount of CO2 as well. Now the alveoli, they are highly vascular structures, meaning it is surrounded by a lot of blood vessels. Alright. Now near this alveoli comes a capillary which is known as the pulmonary capillary, and this capillary brings deoxygenated blood. Alright. Now children, what happens is that since the amount of oxygen is more in the alveoli as compared to the blood, so since there is a gradient, a difference being created, the oxygen will move from high partial pressure to low partial pressure. Similarly, since deoxygenated blood carries more amount of CO2 as compared to inspired air, the CO2 will also move from high concentration or high partial pressure to low partial pressure. That means the blood is going to be purified over here and it is going to be rich in oxygen now, right? And the CO2 that will enter from this exchange in the alveoli, all the CO2 will be expired out, right? That is why we say that the lungs are the organs that help in oxygenation of the blood because of a gaseous exchange that takes place between the alveoli and the blood capillary. Alright. Now children, let's understand the gaseous exchange that takes place at the tissue site. Meaning, this is a cell of a body who is going to receive fresh amount of oxygen from the oxygenated blood. Now a cell is constantly doing chemical reactions, right? And therefore it has a lot of CO2, right? And very little amount of O2. Now this cell is surrounded by this capillary who is bringing fresh amount of oxygen. Now if we look at the difference in the concentration and the pressure of oxygen, we can see that it is higher in the capillary and less in the cell. And therefore the O2 will move from high concentration or high partial pressure to low partial pressure. That means it will exit the blood vessel and it will enter the cell. Similarly, oxygenated blood has very little amount of CO2, right? And as compared to the cell, it has more amount of CO2. Therefore, CO2 will also move from its high concentration or high partial pressure. That is, it will move from the cell and it will enter into this blood vessel. And now this blood vessel will be rich in CO2 and deoxygenated blood is thus formed over here. Alright. So gaseous exchange takes place at two sites. One is at the alveoli site where the blood gets oxygenated, and one is at the tissue site where the blood gets deoxygenated, right? As oxygen is given to the cell. I hope this was clear. Now let's quickly look at the image. Now let's look at this picture. Children, we can see this first picture. This shows inspiration, and the second picture, this shows expiration. So pay attention over here. Can we see the diaphragm, children? The diaphragm has fully contracted and flattened down, and as a result of which the size of the lungs have increased. Similarly, the ribcage has also moved upwards and outwards, and therefore in the other directions the size of the lung have increased. That means with increased lung volume, the lung pressure will drop and inspiration will take place. Similarly, we can see over here that during expiration, the diaphragm relaxes and it again becomes dome shaped. And as a result of which, can you look at the size of the lungs? It has reduced. Exactly. So since the lung volume decreases, the lung pressure increases and the expiration or the exhalation will take place. I hope this was clear, children. So with this, we will end our session over here. I hope the explanation of all the topics was clear. It helped you increase the confidence and improved the clarity of the concept. I will see you soon. Till then, take care and stay curious.